New York City has always sold itself as the capital of ambition, a city where billionaires sip champagne above the clouds, while subway musicians perform underground for loose change. A place where Wall Street bonuses explode like fireworks, while ordinary families calculate whether they can afford eggs, rent, and electricity in the same month. But in 2026, that glittering skyline began to crack under pressure. And standing at the center of the political storm was Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist mayor who once campaigned as the champion of affordability, suddenly found himself accused of preparing one of the most controversial tax moves in modern New York history, a proposed 9.5% property tax hike, a number so massive that homeowners, landlords, investors, and even some Democrats reacted like someone had pulled the fire alarm inside City Hall. For supporters, Mamdani was trying to save the city from financial collapse without crushing public services. For critics, he had become the very thing he promised to fight, another politician making ordinary people pay the price for government overspending. And what made the controversy even more explosive was this: Mamdani claimed the tax hike was not even his first choice. Instead, it was a warning shot aimed directly at New York Governor Kathy Hochul and the political establishment in Albany. His message was simple: tax the rich or everyone else gets hurt. Suddenly, the debate stopped being about numbers. It became a war over ideology, a war over who should carry the burden of a city drowning in deficits, a war over whether New York's wealthy elite were escaping responsibility while middle-class families held the bag. And then came the twist nobody expected. After weeks of outrage, media attacks, financial panic, and political backlash, Mamdani abruptly backed away from the property tax bombshell. The same proposal that dominated headlines disappeared almost overnight, but the damage had already been done, because this wasn't just about taxes anymore. This was about the future of America's largest city. This was about whether progressive economics could survive contact with reality. And this was about a mayor gambling his entire political career on one dangerous calculation. Would New Yorkers rather tax billionaires or themselves? Tonight, we break down the full story behind the proposal that shook New York politics, terrified homeowners, ignited class warfare debates, and exposed the brutal financial reality hiding behind America's richest city. Because beneath the skyscrapers and stock markets, New York may be running out of money. And when a city runs out of money, someone always gets the bill. New York City is not supposed to look weak. This is the financial capital of the United States, the headquarters of billion-dollar hedge funds, the city of Wall Street, luxury penthouses, global banks, and some of the most expensive real estate on Earth. From the outside, New York looks like a machine that prints money endlessly. But underneath that glittering image, something alarming was happening. The city was bleeding cash. According to reports surrounding Mayor Mamdani's 2026 budget proposal, New York faced a budget gap estimated at roughly $5.4 billion. And unlike the federal government, New York City cannot simply print money or endlessly run deficits. By law, the city must maintain a balanced budget. That means the math eventually catches up. Every dollar missing has to be replaced somehow. And that is where the political nightmare began. Mamdani argued that previous administrations had left the city financially vulnerable. Rising costs, slowing revenues, expensive public programs, migrant support expenses, infrastructure needs, pension obligations, and pressure on city services created what he described as a structural imbalance. Imagine trying to run a luxury cruise ship where the fuel bill keeps increasing while passengers refuse to pay higher ticket prices. Eventually, the captain has two choices: cut services or charge more. Mamdani refused to embrace austerity. That single decision changed everything. Because austerity sounds clean in political speeches, but in reality, it means layoffs, cuts to city programs, reduced public services, fewer teachers, delayed infrastructure repairs, sanitation reductions, transportation strain, and social programs collapsing precisely when struggling citizens need them most. To Mamdani and his supporters, austerity was economic poison disguised as discipline. Instead, he proposed something radically different: tax the wealthy harder. According to Reuters, Mamdani pushed for a 2% tax increase on New Yorkers earning over $1 million annually, along with higher taxes on profitable corporations. He argued that the richest residents and biggest companies should contribute more to stabilize the city's finances. Politically, this was classic progressive populism. Economically, it was a direct challenge to the power structure of New York. But there was a catch. The mayor could not simply impose those taxes himself. He needed approval from Albany and Governor Kathy Hochul, and Hochul repeatedly signaled resistance to tax hikes. That resistance trapped Mamdani in a fiscal cage. So he unveiled what he called the last resort, a 9.5% property tax increase. The announcement detonated across the political landscape like a grenade rolling through Times Square. Because property taxes are not abstract numbers on spreadsheets. They hit homeowners directly. They impact landlords. They affect commercial buildings. And eventually, many economists argue, they ripple into rents and living costs for ordinary people. Critics immediately accused Mamdani of betraying his affordability message. Media outlets questioned how a politician who campaigned for working families could even consider such a massive increase. According to coverage highlighted by Economic Times and multiple outlets, journalists openly challenged whether he had abandoned the very people who elected him. But Mamdani's allies insisted the media was missing the point. The property tax plan, they argued, was never the preferred path. It was leverage, a political hostage situation aimed at Albany. Supporters across online discussions argued that Mamdani was effectively telling the state government, either approve taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations or force the city into a painful alternative. The strategy was risky, because once you threaten ordinary people with higher taxes, fear spreads faster than explanations. Homeowners panicked, business groups revolted, moderate Democrats distanced themselves. Even members of the city council showed little enthusiasm for supporting such a dramatic increase. And then another uncomfortable reality emerged. Even if the rich were taxed more heavily, would they stay? That question haunted the debate like a shadow over Manhattan. New York's wealthy already pay enormous taxes compared to many states. Critics warned that pushing rates even higher could accelerate migration to lower tax states like Florida and Texas. Financial elites, hedge fund managers, investors, and high-income professionals are more mobile than ever before. In a digital economy, money can relocate frighteningly fast. If the rich leave, the tax base shrinks. And when the tax base shrinks, governments often squeeze the middle class harder. That fear transformed the debate from a local budget issue into a national ideological battle. Can progressive taxation sustain a global financial city, or does punishing wealth eventually weaken the system that funds everything? New York became the laboratory for that experiment, and the entire country was watching.
Class warfare in the city of billionaires. New York has always contained two separate universes pretending to occupy the same geography. One universe rides helicopters to rooftop meetings. The other waits for delayed subway trains while calculating whether rent will consume 70% of next month's paycheck. One universe owns penthouses that sit empty for most of the year. The other universe shares apartments with roommates into their late 30s. This economic divide became the fuel powering Mamdani's political rise. He did not speak like a traditional establishment Democrat. He spoke like someone declaring war on an economic system that, in his view, had transformed New York into a playground for extreme wealth, while ordinary workers struggled to survive. And nowhere was that message more explosive than taxation. Mamdani framed the issue with brutal simplicity. New York City generates enormous wealth, yet too much of that wealth remains concentrated at the top, while public systems strain under pressure. According to statements cited in reports, Mamdani argued that wealthy New Yorkers and profitable corporations should contribute more so that the city could avoid devastating cuts and preserve services. To progressive voters, this sounded reasonable. To critics, it sounded dangerous. Because New York's economy depends heavily on high earners, a relatively small percentage of taxpayers contribute a massive share of total tax revenue. That creates a fragile ecosystem. Governments need wealthy residents financially, yet politically, many voters resent extreme wealth concentration. It is like building your city on the back of a golden tiger. You need the tiger alive, but the tiger is also terrifying. The class warfare narrative intensified when discussions expanded beyond income taxes into luxury real estate. According to Reuters coverage, controversy even erupted after Mamdani highlighted billionaire properties, including attention surrounding hedge fund billionaire Ken Griffin's penthouse. Citadel pushed back strongly, accusing the mayor of unfairly targeting wealthy individuals. And that moment revealed something deeper happening beneath the policy debate. This was becoming symbolic. The penthouse became a political character. The billionaire became a metaphor. The tax fight became emotional theater, representing America's widening inequality crisis. Supporters of Mamdani argued that billionaires had benefited enormously from New York's infrastructure, markets, workforce, and economic ecosystem, while ordinary residents absorbed rising living costs. To them, asking millionaires to pay slightly more was not radical. It was overdue. But opponents warned that ideology was blinding the administration to economic reality. Higher taxes, they argued, could discourage investment, encourage relocation, weaken property markets, reduce business activity, and ultimately hurt the same workers Mamdani claimed to protect. This is the paradox haunting progressive cities across America. Public services require funding, but funding depends on economic activity, and economic activity often depends on wealthy individuals and corporations that can leave if conditions become unfavorable. Cities like New York operate in global competition now. Billionaires are not trapped inside state borders anymore. Financial firms can shift operations, investors can change residency. Remote work accelerated mobility even further after the pandemic years. That fear turned Mamdani's proposal into a psychological battle over confidence. Would investors still believe in New York? Would property owners still invest? Would businesses still expand? Or would the city slowly become a cautionary tale where ideology chased away capital? Critics hammered this argument relentlessly. Meanwhile, supporters countered with their own question. What is the point of protecting economic growth if ordinary people can't afford to live in the city producing it? That question landed heavily because New York's affordability crisis is impossible to ignore. Rents remain brutal, housing shortages persist, working families face crushing costs, and many younger residents increasingly feel locked out of the very city their labor sustains. In online discussions and political debates, some defenders argued Mamdani was not truly advocating the property tax increase itself. Instead, they described it as a strategic threat designed to force state leaders towards taxing the wealthy rather than burdening the broader population. But politically, nuance is fragile. Most people don't hear strategic leverage. They hear your taxes may rise 9.5%. And once fear enters the conversation, opponents seize it instantly. Headlines exploded, media narratives hardened, moderate Democrats became nervous. Even some progressive allies worried the messaging disaster could damage Mamdani's long-term credibility. Because the property tax proposal struck directly at homeowners, small landlords, retirees, and middle-class residents already squeezed by inflation. For many New Yorkers, the issue stopped being about billionaires versus workers. It became personal survival. And that is when the political storm truly began to spiral.
The retreat, the backlash, and the future of New York. And then, suddenly, the bomb never exploded. After months of headlines, outrage, political warfare, and panic across New York's real estate world, Zohran Mamdani quietly backed away from the proposal that had terrified homeowners and electrified conservative media. The 9.5% property tax hike was gone. Not reduced, not delayed. Gone. For weeks, New Yorkers had been told the city faced a financial cliff. Mamdani warned that without new revenue from the wealthy or major assistance from Albany, the city could be forced into painful choices. According to Bloomberg and multiple local outlets, the mayor framed the tax increase as a last resort if Governor Kathy Hochul refused to support higher taxes on millionaires and corporations. But the political math behind the proposal was collapsing almost as fast as the budget gap itself. Because while progressive activists supported the idea of taxing the ultra-rich, the property tax proposal triggered a completely different reaction. Middle-class homeowners revolted. Moderate Democrats panicked. Business groups sounded alarms. And even many people who liked Mamdani's broader affordability agenda suddenly froze when they imagined their own bills increasing. This was the moment the political fantasy collided with reality. New York politics may celebrate progressive rhetoric, but property taxes are different. They are immediate, brutally visible. Unlike income taxes hidden in payroll systems, property taxes arrive like a hammer through the mailbox. Homeowners feel them instantly. Landlords react instantly. Rent debates intensify instantly. And Mamdani knew that, which is why many political observers began arguing that the proposal was never truly intended to happen. Instead, it was leverage, pressure, a giant flashing warning sign aimed at Albany. The message was simple. If the state refuses to tax the wealthy, the city will be cornered into choices nobody wants. Even online discussions reflected that interpretation. On Reddit and political forums, supporters argued the proposal existed primarily to force Governor Hochul into negotiations and expose the limits of the city's financial power. And eventually, Albany moved. According to reports published this week, Governor Kathy Hochul agreed to provide billions in additional support and financial adjustments to help stabilize the city budget. The revised arrangement reportedly included aid measures, funding flexibility, and revenue discussions connected to luxury property taxation. That changed everything, because once new state support appeared, Mamdani no longer needed the nuclear option. The property tax threat had served its purpose, and in revised budget discussions, the proposal disappeared. But here is where the story becomes fascinating. Mamdani's critics called the retreat proof of failure. His supporters called it proof of strategy. Two completely different realities emerged from the same event. Critics argued the mayor had created unnecessary panic. According to opponents, the administration scared homeowners, destabilized confidence, damaged relations with investors, and floated a politically impossible proposal simply to gain negotiating leverage. Some even accused the mayor of using fiscal fear theatrically to strengthen his ideological position. And honestly, from one perspective, they had a point. The backlash was massive. Even Democrats within New York politics began distancing themselves from the idea. According to reporting, several city council members showed little appetite for approving such a dramatic increase, especially because it risked alienating homeowners and renters alike. That resistance mattered, because property taxes in New York do not stay trapped at the top. Landlords pass costs down, commercial buildings increase rents, businesses adjust prices. The pressure flows through the economy like electricity through metal wires. A tax aimed at balancing the budget could eventually ripple into higher housing costs anyway. And in a city already drowning in affordability problems, that political risk looked explosive. But Mamdani's allies saw something entirely different unfolding. To them, this was political brinkmanship, a calculated move, a pressure tactic designed to expose Albany's dependence on New York City while forcing the governor to negotiate rather than ignore the city's financial crisis. And when state support finally arrived, they claimed victory. In their eyes, Mamdani had essentially stared down the political establishment and extracted concessions without actually implementing the feared tax hike. That interpretation spread rapidly across progressive spaces online. Many supporters insisted the proposal was always framed as a warning, not a preferred policy. But regardless of which side was right, something deeper had already changed. Because the episode exposed a terrifying truth about modern cities. Even America's richest city is struggling to pay its bills. Think about that for a second. This is New York City, the financial capital of the planet, the city of Wall Street, the headquarters of billion-dollar hedge funds, the kingdom of luxury real estate. And even this city is locked in desperate battles over deficits, taxation, housing costs, pension obligations, public transit funding, and social spending. That realization shook people far beyond New York, because if New York is financially strained, what happens to everyone else? And this is why the Mamdani controversy became much larger than one tax proposal. It became a preview of the battles likely coming to major cities across the developed world. Cities are becoming more unequal. Housing is becoming more expensive. Public services cost more every year. Infrastructure ages. Migration changes tax bases. And politicians everywhere are running out of painless solutions. Sooner or later, governments face only terrible choices: raise taxes, cut services, borrow more money, or gamble politically. Mamdani chose the gamble. And for a brief moment, he pushed New York to the edge of one of the biggest property tax battles in modern city history. In the end, the tax hike vanished, but the fear did not, the questions did not, the structural problems did not, and perhaps most importantly, the class war conversation did not. Because once a city openly debates who should carry the financial burden of survival, that debate never fully disappears. Not in New York, not in America, and certainly not in an era where ordinary people increasingly feel like they are financing systems designed for someone else's wealth.